Okay, so good afternoon, or should we say good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone who's tuning into our call today. So I'd like to welcome everybody, and I'd like to welcome my guests around me, not literally, but virtually. So I'd like to introduce Stephen Rees, who's my BMS friend of many, many years. We've followed each other's careers. Martin Wager, who's from Centrica.
Hi, everybody.
CHP does a lot of work in the CHP industry, and we've been doing some really big projects lately. Mike Mann, a very close energy consultant that we've been doing quite a lot of work over the last 12 months on various projects regarding KVA, quite exciting projects. And John Willholland, who's now started a very exciting training program for energy consciousness. So thank you, everyone. I'd like to first start off by introducing myself. My name's Paul Webb from a company called B2B Energy. I have a dream to develop energy experts globally across the world and training and developing them. The world has become very small now. Now we've got Zoom, and it's become very exciting. And I've felt that the energy consultants around the world are really getting closer and closer together. And it's my dream to have all these energy consultants and experts holding hands around the world, sharing best practice and all the knowledge. So I'm here today really to hold this talk today and really sort of grow some initiatives regarding the energy consciousness, is what John's been talking about. So firstly, before we start that, I'd like each of the team to introduce himself. So Martin, would you like to give us some background?
Yeah, hi everybody. Yeah, my name's Martin Wager. I work for Centrica Business Solutions, which is part of the Centrica Group. We've got interests in the UK, Europe, and America. I've been in the electricity and power industry for around just over 35 years now. Originally with an electricity supply company, and then in the late 1990s moved over to CHP, which I've been involved in for now over 20 years.
Brilliant, thank you. Mike Mann?
Yeah, thank you, Paul. I currently work as a building services design consultant and energy and sustainability consultant. My initial training was as an electrical engineer, but I spent most of my career with a large global multidiscipline engineering consultancy. I've spent about 10 years living and working overseas in the Middle East, Africa and South America. I've worked as a director, office manager, resident engineer and technical advisor to UK, UAE, African, Brazilian and Korean clients. My experience covers large mixed-use retail-led schemes, hotels, offices, high-rise, healthcare developments, education and private residential. My focus has always been on the client and user requirements and creating better, healthier places, not just energy efficient ones. And I've spent the last 10 years focusing on energy efficiency, carbon and sustainability. But I've been involved in energy efficiency projects for longer than I care to think. I've got recent experience of energy management, compliance and certifications such as ESOS, SECA and ISO 50001, which are obviously mainly European focused standards, of energy service contracts, energy procurement, private utility networks and other utility sector specialisms.
Brilliant, Mike. Thank you very much for that. It's an amazing career you've had. And John, please.
Yeah, hi everyone. John Willholland. I've been in the energy field for 46 years. I'm a chemical engineer by training and worked in big process plants. For the last 32 years, I've worked as a consultant. I was with Knife's Consulting Group for 24 years, a director there. And then 8 years ago, set up my own business, Willholland Energy. And the three areas that I focus on now are energy auditing. I'm an ESOS leader, SASA, ISO 50001, and my biggest passion is behavior change and getting energy savings through adopting and harnessing people power. That's me.
Brilliant. Thank you, John. Thank you for joining us today. And then Stephen.
Hi, everyone. Name is Steve Rees, 33 years in the BMS and building services industry and working for SSE Enterprise, the Energy Solutions Division, which is part of the SSE PLC, a generator of renewable electricity in the UK and Ireland. It develops, owns and operates low carbon infrastructure to support the zero carbon transition, which includes onshore and offshore wind farms, hydropower, electricity transmission and distribution grids, gas and energy from waste, alongside providing energy products and services for businesses, commercial, hospitals, etc. My role is to develop the energy products and services using best of breed products and solutions with a focus on building energy management systems, controls optimization, analytics, business energy intelligence, building performance gap, as well as energy performance contracts.
Brilliant, thank you. And just to sort of underline that, we've got some significant years around the table today regarding our knowledge and what we've seen. And, predominantly we're UK based experts, but, we've all worked across the globe. We've all seen the same, the same things regarding the UK and across the world. And what I've noticed over my sort of last couple of months of such is that we all talk the same language, even though we don't talk the same language. We all talk kilowatt hours. And that's what we're all here to do, is drive down kilowatt hours, which in effect gives the client a benefit regarding profit. It does give us a green effect regarding, making our planet a better place by reducing climate change. And, personally, I don't think we can stop climate change, but we can slow it down and make a big impact and a big dent to that carbon figures. Now, people don't always realize this, but energy is your third largest expense after your properties and after your cost for your people. So focusing on energy really should be really high on your list regarding that. Now, I've been talking to some organizations recently, and the biggest worry they have is investing in energy management. Now that, for me, I think is a wrong approach, because there's other ways we can look to start an energy management strategy. And of course, we've been doing this morning was all about energy consciousness and about using the people within your organization to drive energy down. Now, what I'd like to do is just like John to just elaborate on that just a little bit further, if he can.
Yeah, sure. When it comes to saving energy, I think my view is that there are three key things to look for. One is technical solutions. Secondly, data measures, utilizing data for best effect to find out what's going on. And then thirdly, people solutions, behavior change. And if you can imagine all of these three things working together in a dynamic equilibrium, that adds up to a really effective energy conscious organization, if you like. And so really, behavior and people solutions cannot be treated separately from the technical and the data. All three of them have got to work together well. And very often, what I've observed over the last 30 years or so is that some organizations are very good at installing technical measures, but they totally ignore the people side of it. And what happens there is that the technical investment they make isn't fully realized because they've not engaged the people who are actually going to run the plant or equipment. And similarly with data, I've seen many building energy management systems that have been installed, but because they've ignored the people side, those building energy management systems, instead of saving energy, some of them can actually waste energy. And so the whole people side of things has to be looked at in energy policy and energy strategy. And that's why I'm a great fan of ISO 50001, simply because at the heart of 50001 is people. So if you look at all the clauses, some are very much directly related to people, like competence, training, communication, awareness. But all the other clauses have got a people element, such as design and procurement. And so I think that a very good lever for behaviour change is ISO 50001. And I think in my 46 years in energy, I would say 50001 has been the most significant step forward, apart from the invention of the internet, in energy management. So I think there's a lot of potential savings globally. And if we could address the whole issue of people, opportunities, behaviour in organisations, I do believe that we could make a very significant reduction in carbon emissions globally, and it could be a key element in actually achieving the zero emissions that we want to achieve.
Brilliant. I was involved with an organisation where they didn't want to invest money in new technologies, and we didn't need to, because once I started working with them, looking at the patterns of their opening and closing, working with their cleaners regarding how they opened the properties and the way they were cleaning the properties, they had the whole organisation was turned on regarding their lights, air conditioning. And once we focused on that, we made some significant savings just by cleaning the places differently. And it doesn't take much to then start to trigger that. Now, I like to then use that as investment to follow that through for the next level of energy management, the amount of savings that you make, and then start to snowball it across.
That's a really good example, Paul. And can I just chip in one little example? We talk about going for zero emissions, and we look at it and think, we've got to get from 100% down to zero. How are we going to do that? And people solutions can play a very big, significant part in achieving that for next to no capital cost. So I think it's a great opportunity. Sorry, Paul.
That's okay. Steve, you picked up a point prior to that. Obviously, we're going to move into the technology side and how that impacts on technology. But you picked up on a point that we were discussing before the call. I'd share that with us.
Yes, I mean, this is going back to probably the mid 80s, but even more recently, 3 or 4 years ago, I was working at a building which was a legal company, and they actually asked us to install dummy thermostats on the wall, because when people can't adjust their own temperatures, the temperature is always too hot or too cold. It's never right, and you get the people factor, and that generally comes back to complaints to the facilities team that then speak to the controls team. It's not controlling right, and you can put all the monitoring in that you want, and you're proving that it's at 19, 20, 21 degrees. And so going back to the 80s, for a government building, we were installing dummy thermostats just so people think that by adjusting it, they do feel comfortable. And if they're uncomfortable, they'll adjust it even more to compensate. It was just an interesting psychological feeling. But one of the other big impacts that we have is on buildings with opening windows, where because people are too hot or too cold, rather than adjust the temperature or adjust the thermostat or contact facilities to do so, they'll open up a window. And then that opening a window creates either greater heating or cooling demand in the plant, which maybe the local fan cooling can't achieve. So this legal company, they were just watching people, and they decided that actually the males in the office were generally wearing suit jackets, and they always wanted a cooler temperature, and the females were probably wearing blouses, t-shirts or whatever, and always felt the cold. So one of the things that they asked the staff to do, whether male or female, that when you're in the office, you wear a jacket. They could reduce the temperatures in the winter, according, maybe save a degree. And there was gents in the summer would not wear jackets, so they could increase the temperature by maybe a degree or a degree and a half on set point. So everyone maintained their comfort by dressing accordingly. And there was a massive energy saving by either a plus or minus 1.5 degrees on set point. So there's a big psychological part within the people message as well.
Mike, I see you had a wry smile there. It's something we've all come across, haven't we?
Yes, I mean, I've experienced both of those situations of installing psychological thermostats, and the difficulty that males and females have, but also, of course, you get people from different cultures and backgrounds, and
Yes.
basically just different physiological makeup. Who some people like it at 20, some people like it at 22. I always recall working in the Middle East. That every building you went into, you needed a jacket because they would typically operate it at 19. But when those clients came over to the UK, they wanted their hotel rooms at 26. And I could never quite understand that. But psychology plays a big part in all of this.
Yeah. One thing we used to do when I actually worked for the Met Police in their energy, I was energy officer as a Met Police, we used to print off graphs if anyone was complaining that the temperature was too low or too high, and demonstrate to them that we was meeting the government requirements, which I think used to be 19 degrees and 23 degrees for room temperatures. And then in the end, we was giving them these little indicators that you would change colour as it got to the right temperatures. We saved ourselves some significant complaints about temperatures, and we were able to then meet the criteria on our BMS system and make the savings. These sort of factors really do help the situation.
I think
Martin,
we're going to move to a slightly different scenario where building occupants are going to be looking at air quality as they currently do with temperature. So, there's lots of projects I'm seeing coming through where they actually want air quality sensors in the office space with a traffic light system on. People are going to expect that. And, I can imagine, and probably quite rightly with the current situation, that if your traffic light goes from green to amber, then you're on the phone asking for more air. Can we hold that thought? Because I know Mike's got some significant expertise in this area, and I'm sure he'd like to share that with us. But before we touch on that, Martin, your technologies really do run without any human interface, do they? And it's, in fact, we don't want hardly any human interface with those regarding the CHP.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, a lot of the technologies that we employ, CHP, solar, batteries, are really, set it and forget it almost. We remotely monitor all the systems that we have throughout the world, either back in Windsor at the Centrica office there, or in Salford, which is the mainly the CHP monitoring desk. And I think that it's fair to say that by doing that we can prevent failures if something's going out of tolerance, because we monitor so many things. We can also look at the routine maintenance and plan that well ahead to minimise any downtime, and ultimately, in 99% of the cases, we know if there's anything gone on with the kit that's on the site even before the client does, and can quite often remotely repair it or look after it, and then let the client know afterwards that we've just done a tweak or done something from from an office or a van somewhere else.
Yeah. So for me, that's the other side of the coin regarding having the technologies managing their energy, but without any behaviour being allowed to get involved with it at all.
Yeah, I think the other thing as well is, it's, listen to what everybody else has said. It's important to have the data available from your site or your business, and get an understanding of where you're using energy and why you're using it. And going back to your point, Paul, is where the cleaners were involved and you could change an operation, then substantial savings can be made both financially and in a kilowatt hour base. Yeah.
I agree. So we're holding the conversation for the air quality and the importance of that. Mike, can you give us some points? What's been changing in that world recently?
I think the global issues around the COVID-19 pandemic have made everybody pay a lot more attention to the risks and causes of the spread of the disease, and it seems as if the focus really has come down to ventilation, and I think two extremely broad conclusions, really, that if you're outdoors, you're generally okay, but if you're indoors, it's ventilation, which is the key issue. And I think, what I'm hearing at the moment is that people are applying technology. Have to be said, I think it's in a bit of a panic because they're trying to make their buildings safe and keep their people safe. But I think we're going to see a lot of mistakes made because of that. And I think also people generally don't understand how their buildings work. And I think this matter of educating people, I think, as an industry, for very good reasons, we've tended to use technology to override human nature or compensate for it. And I think that's good. And I think the technology that we've now got in the last 5 or 10 years enables that to be done quite autonomously and for people to be kept safe and comfortable without them really knowing what's going on. But I think everybody in the longer term needs to understand more about how energy systems work and what's good, what's bad, and what's indifferent. But I think on the COVID thing, as Stephen said, lots of people are putting in CO2 as an indicator of air quality. And I think that's very valid. But certainly the recommendations I'm seeing from CIBSE and ASHRAE and people like that at the moment are saying set your controls to 400 parts per million. Well, the problem with that is that outdoor air is probably a bit above that. And if you're in a polluted city centre somewhere, that basically means your fresh air plant is going to be running flat out all the time. So I think we don't really have the answer to that yet. It's about lots of things to do with the pandemic. But I think CO2 as an indicator of air quality is valid, but I think it needs some intelligent interpretation of the building, the location, etc. And you've also got to remember that the sensors only tell you what's going on where the sensors are. And it's possibly the small meeting rooms and other corners of the building that don't have sensors that may be the most dangerous.
Very good point, that last point, Mike. And it's always this, how accurate are the sensors as well? We've got that reliance, we've got the calibration of sensors and things like that. And the offsets that are probably in place. So,
I think it's like with so much energy efficient technology, there's a lot of cheap rubbish out there. And I think for me, in the broad context of this discussion, what I would say is, you get what you pay for, but also I'd urge anybody who's thinking of implementing a project to give it time, because it's that old adage that perfect planning prevents poor performance. Clients who decide that they're going to implement a strategy or they need to get on with this, to set targets like, well, we want this done in 3 months. All I can say is, in my experience, a well thought out and implemented project takes about 12 months if you're focused on it. So the time is as important as the energy.
Yeah. On this subject of COVID and what's happening with our building stock, specifically in the UK, we've got a lot of building stock there that's sitting empty. And I'm also hearing a lot of building stock that's sitting empty, and the organisations and clients are still complaining that their bills are still high because they're still using the energy. Now, this is where I think behaviour patterns really works its best at the weekends and when we're not using those properties. So now is really a good time to increase your approach, I think, on behaviour patterns and what we're doing there. What's your thoughts on that, John? Do you agree with where I'm going with that conversation?
Yeah, definitely. I fully agree with it. I think, I've got clients who've got all sorts of problems in retail because They want to make it safe for the customers and also for the staff. And when they're running on full fresh air, the chillers can't bring the temperature down sufficient in summer. So while they're theoretically safe by full fresh air through their systems, the temperatures are rising in the stores. But now we're coming into autumn in Britain, then the problem's starting to go away. But I think Mike is absolutely right. There are so many problems relating to COVID in the energy world that we just haven't got them bottomed. And one of them this morning that came out quite strongly was, how do you measure energy savings in COVID? Because the baselines have all changed. You know, you can't say, you know, the normal way of operating is to put a baseline and compare energy data with what you would have used if, you know, you hadn't done the intervention. But because all the ground's shifting under you with COVID in terms of, like you said, Paul, about empty office blocks, you know, how do you actually prove that you've made any savings, either through technical measures or behavioural? And that is a big challenge. So, yeah, it's an interesting area.
I think that's, sorry, Paul.
Financial penalties on not achieving some of the targeted energy savings as well. So, you know, that'd be interesting to know what happens to those contracts. Are they on hold? Are they being rewritten? It's quite a complicated matter.
But we're talking minimum takes of energy. Is that what?
Yeah, possibly, or even, you know, if for example, company A have committed to go and save 10%, you know, and there are financial penalties as well as financial gains. You know, what happens under a COVID operating plant that's running at, you know, full fresh air, full extract, 24/7. You know, what do you do with an energy performance contract?
Yeah, you can't, can you really? Because you've just got to put it on hold, haven't you?
Yeah, you claim force majeure. I think that's going to be the guess out on that one.
So for me, when I've implemented technology, for instance, and one of the stories that I would tell here is that we was working with a hotel group, and we said, look, you've got all these boilers, and we would recommend putting boiler optimization in there. Now, these units, we've used them before within the leisure world, make significant savings. Sadly, we decided to install all these units in February. I can't remember the actual year of it, but it was the February when we had the coldest winter in like 100 years. And we do get them. So there we are with our client in March, and he's saying to us, I've just looked at my energy bills, my gas bills. You've installed this technology, and it's the worst. I've used more energy. So in those cases, I use regression analysis and degree day to actually prove that point. But even then, he didn't accept that. We then engaged with other hotel groups to say, look, what's your gas bills been like in February? And they agreed. They all stated, yeah, they've all gone up. So that's the only way. So he ignored the actual hard fact data, but listened to his peers. So there are ways we can prove it through regression analysis or something like that, where you could take the sales value of that organization and compare that with the energy. So I think there is ways to normalize it, but us as energy experts need to find those ways and need to learn those ways, really. There's various different ways to, as I say, skin a cat, I think. So
I think what you said there, Paul, is very valid, and it's a common problem, and that comes down. I think it comes down to the issue of the problems we have with most things in life, that is communication. And a few years ago in the UK, we were all, or at least from a political point of view, we were all anti-expert. This year, we're all pro-experts and bringing them in to tell us what to do. And I think all I would say in the energy efficiency arena is, yeah, actually, you do need to be a bit of an expert, and you need to be listening to your advisors. And I think clients that who only look at the big numbers and say, oh, well, we're going to save X from this, whether it's kilowatts or pounds or whatever you're measuring it in, and don't take note of the variables that are involved, the fact is the energy business is actually very complex and getting it right. And I'm a big believer in Pareto's law, or the 80-20 rule that, and, some of those things are that, you can get 80% of the effect for 20% of the effort. And it's amazing how often those kind of numbers come into play when you work something through in more detail. But for me, I'm not a great fan, and I might shock you here, Paul, but I'm not a great fan of detailed monitoring and targeting. And I think detailed measurement and verification is a bit of a problem as well. You often find in the real world, major energy users like chemical plants and steelworks and things like that, they've usually got good SCADA systems and automation data acquisition systems which give them the data. But most of the energy in this world is used by small businesses and small buildings, and they don't have that sophistication. And I think sometimes you've just got to, instead of looking in the rear view mirror, you need to look where you're going. And I think, COVID is a situation like that where, it's thrown out all sorts of parameters for people, and the benchmarks are probably not worth very much now. But I think if you've got good communication in a team and people are focused on where they're going rather than where they've been, those bumps in the road can be overcome. But it's about having good advisors, listening to each other and agreeing the plan going forward. And as ever, you need contingencies, allowances to get you through some of the rough patches.
Did you want to say amen after that, Mike?
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, it is rather a philosophical position, I know, but I think that's, at the end of the day, everything to do with energy efficiency is like any other project. It's a project, and
Exactly.
Projects work because of the team, and you need a good team to get the results that you're looking for.
Yeah. One of the questions on this course today that we attended was, who should you engage regarding energy management and what you're trying to deliver? And it would be the managing director of the business. It would be the facilities manager. It would be the maintenance team. It would be maybe the office manager. Who do you engage? Well, it's obvious. Everyone has an impact on it. And when I was working for that leisure group, I would say everyone, and it wasn't until we focused on the cleaning team that we really started to make a big difference. And we worked with the contracts manager who managed the cleaning. So it is everyone in the organisation.
And that's confirmed with what John was talking about. If you get buy-in from people that are actually in the office about the reason why we don't open windows, the reason why the temperature is this, and you address them accordingly, and everyone buys into the end game, the vision. Everyone buys into that, then everyone's happy, and they know why they're doing things, and they'll they take ownership.
I was working for a couple of years ago for a government building, and they was wondering why I was walking around talking to everybody, talking to the security guys, the cleaners and the operators. Yes. And really what I was doing was promoting the fact that on my badge said energy manager. By them looking to see that this energy manager was walking around, they'd ask me, so what do you do? I said, well, I help the organisation save money and save energy. And then they'll see me turning lights off. Very quickly, that culture then starts to change. It doesn't take long to start getting that momentum going. That's one, something that really sticks in my mind is really engaging with everybody. So how do we as experts take this to the next level now?
Well, if I could just chip in here, Paul, we've been launching this project called ENCO, the Energy Conscious Organisation. And one of the main planks of it is actually to train up energy consultants to make better use of the behavioural opportunities, because energy consultants in organisations have got some rare insights into what is going on in their client sites. They know a lot of the technical issues, they know the data issues, and opportunities as well. And so today we had 25 energy consultants, mainly from the UK, on this course. And as people introduced themselves, one of the things that struck me was how much expertise they actually had. You know, that probably the average person on the course had got 25 to 35 years worth of experience. And given that these people are working for very large organizations, if they can get skilled up and equipped on some of the behavioral and psychological sides of getting things done, and the point that Mike made there about the energy team and good communication is absolutely vital. Then, and the point you made, Paul, about everyone making a difference. One of the things we do on this course is to say, while everyone can make a difference, the point that Mike made about the Pareto principle is really true as well, that sometimes if you apply Pareto in organizations, you might find that 20% of the people in the organization can affect 80% of the savings. But also Pareto sometimes doesn't apply. And in one or two organizations I've been in, I've found that 2 or 3% of the people in the organization can basically save up to about 90% of the available energy. So when you're doing a behavioral or people-based solution, it's really important to get the strategy right. And you'll find that in some organizations, it'll vary greatly from another organization. And therefore, there's no silver bullet, there's no off-the-shelf solution. You've got to actually look at each organization and consider all the factors that that affect it in order to harness these savings.
Just to let everyone know, we've just had a question come in from Carl McGregor, and he's asked, what about the balance? Well, there's two questions actually. What about the balance between budget and efficiency? Does anyone?
Yeah, I was just looking at that, Paul, and I think, yeah, it's a good point. But I think the balance between budget and efficiency is you get what you pay for, and I would say beware of low-hanging fruit, because I think many organisations go for the low-hanging fruit, e.g. maybe LED lighting, and they quickly find themselves in a bit of a minefield, or when they then say, right, what do we do next? They find that it hasn't been specified correctly. I think on his particular point on hydronic systems, again, I think it's project-specific analysis, because you might find that a ground source heat pump is a great solution in a property where you've got a lake or a river or something like that going by. But in many city centre and urban areas, you don't have the space. And there are all sorts of problems with ground source. You know, there are buildings in London which used boreholes for cooling, a heat rejection. And what they discovered after a couple of years was that as one or two other buildings in the area started pumping their heat into the ground, the system efficiency dropped off. So a bit of forward thinking and vision, I think, on things is a good idea. But generally, I think the balance between cost and efficiency is you get what you pay for. I mean, you can put LED lights into a building for probably £40 a point. What I would say is you probably get better value over the life cycle of the project and the equipment if you spent probably 8 or 10 times that amount. Because with LEDs as an example, there's still equipment out there on the market which is around the 100 lumens per watt mark, whereas the best equipment is going towards 200. So just simply on the type of equipment you choose, you can be twice as efficient. And if you don't control it and have other features on it, you can lose another 50 or 60% of your energy. So it's a complex equation. And back to what I said earlier, this is why you need people with good experience and a bit of expertise.
So from that point, when we come to budget and efficiency, I carry out a significant process of doing due diligence on products and technologies. So, you initially do a concept design regarding, I'm going to put LEDs into this building. You don't know who the manufacturer is. You don't know what controls you're going to do. So you put your concept idea forward to your organization. This is picking up from ESOS, where you're picking up, it's going to be this cost, this saving, this payback. Then from there, once you got the buy-in and the appetite from the organization, then you need to go out to tender and really select the right technologies to put in place there. And even if you was just buying technology, we'll talk LEDs, you wouldn't go out to your supermarket and go and buy X amount of lights. Yes, the budget is right, but you haven't done your due diligence regarding, how long is that, the guarantees on that piece of equipment. There's lots of things, are you going to be able to service it? So for instance, if we look at the other end of the spectrum, CHP with Centrica, you're going to go into a CHP project, you're going to install a very important piece of equipment, but you need to know that that piece of equipment is going to be maintained, and the service levels after that piece of equipment going in is going to be maintained. So there's a balance. There is a balance regarding budget.
And I always relay a story, Paul, that prior to Centrica, when I worked for another CHP company, we installed a couple of CHPs at a leisure centre and it got 1 year O&M contract with it. When it came for renewal, the local authority said, no, you're too expensive, so we're going to go to somebody local. They did the first service on it, but what they hadn't allowed for in their costings or wasn't in their expertise is that CHPs need a special oil. And they'd gone down to the local Halfords, bought a load of oil, and one of the engines went bang, and it never worked again. We had to cannibalise. We got called back in. We had to cannibalise that one engine to keep the other one running because they bought them and they got no other capital to replace it. So it's a case, going back to what Mike said earlier on. It's you do get what you pay for in a lot of these things, and it's making sure you're comparing apples for apples. Yeah, that's what it's all about.
Yeah, buy cheap, buy twice.
When who just said that? Buy cheap, buy twice. I was just about to say that saying that my dad would say to me.
Yeah, that was me, Paul. Yeah.
So has anyone got any experience regarding geothermal and hydronic?
The only geothermal experience I've had was actually on a district heating and cooling scheme, and that was limited. So I certainly wouldn't put myself forward as an expert in that. So yeah, that's not something that I would want to get into any detail on in this type of discussion, I don't think.
Right. Just to let the audience know, if you've got any further questions, please just fire them over, because they are coming up on our screens if you want us to discuss any particular conversation, any particular topic, as I should say. So where would we regarding bringing these experts in, and how can we make a difference? Do you think, I know the UK government we have various different legislations that have been introduced, and I have come across other legislations globally through my journeys. But for me, this legislation just needs a little bit more edge, a little bit more teeth, really, to really make a difference. So I'd like to sort of engage Mike and John on that, really, regarding the legislation that's out there that can be addressed.
Well, could I just give one piece of legislation that could make a very big difference in the UK, and that is to follow Germany's example of giving fiscal incentives to companies to put 50,001, ISO 50001 into their organizations, because in Germany, they have an advanced way of rewarding companies who do the right thing, which we don't have in this country. The only benefit of having 50,001 is that it's a route to ESOS compliance, which is in Europe, across Europe, is a scheme where you have to do energy audits every 4 years. And, that's good. It's a start. But if every country in the world did what Germany did, then we would have a step change in making a difference in climate change. And so I think it is up to legislators to have a bit more vision and to try and have an integrated approach to energy management within the economic frameworks of the countries they live in. And it's quite interesting. If you go to Hungary, they have 1,000 times more certifications per GDP than somewhere like the USA. So if you look at the number of ISO 50001 certifications and then compare it to the GDP of the country, somewhere like the USA is way behind some Central European country. So the scope for change is absolutely massive globally.
There's another question coming from, so do you want to pick, sorry, if someone's just about to pick a point up.
Yeah, well, you talked about that last point that was raised there, Paul.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of hybridized solutions, I mean, again, I think, project specifics always come into play on something like that. But I think one thing that is clear going forward with energy efficiency and sustainability, because I think, really the two things should be joined together nowadays, is that hybrid systems, I think, are going to become de rigueur, because unless you're in a fortunate position, say like with a car, where you can go full electric and generate your own power, and then you can sit back and smile at everybody else in terms of what you've done and what they need to do. I think, in the commercial and domestic area, hybrid systems will become pretty normalised, because having CHP, heat pumps, and a conventional full throttle gas or other type of fired boiler is with thermal stores is the type of solution that will become quite normal. And, even in a domestic situation, you'll see that, albeit on a much smaller scale.
Yeah.
I think the other thing as well on that is that you'll find from a power perspective that batteries will become used a lot more, both in the commercial, industrial, and right down to domestic use, especially with people having more electric vehicles or hybrids. Then there's obviously potential to charge batteries at off-peak times and reverse charge and various other things like that. And I think it will become a lot more normal to have a hybrid system rather than the old electricity supply and gas supply and a boiler. It will be a lot more decentralised and using the newer technologies.
Yeah, I think hybrid systems are definitely going to be the way forward. I mean, I had a conversation with somebody the other day and used the analogy of a domestic storage battery that's probably going to cost you somewhere between about £3,000 and £5,000 at current prices. The fact that if you had an electric vehicle, you'd have a battery of about 10 times the size sat outside your house doing nothing. And whilst using that as an energy source and an energy storage medium seems complicated, and you have to think about it and have some degree of planning in what you're doing. When you've got a big resource like that, which is sat there doing nothing for 18 hours a day, it makes an awful lot of sense to bring it into the energy realm rather than just seeing it as a means of transport. And that's just another example of a hybrid system. These things, usually the best solutions will be multifaceted. The old keep it simple, stupid approach, that was great when energy was cheap and, you could put in big pipes and big boilers without worrying too much. But in today's sophisticated, elegant solution, complexity needs to be part of the equation, I think.
I agree with you there, Mike. And from me as a, so, you know, this has all come off the back of the Clean Energy Revolution group, today's presentations. And for me, that group has been made up of environmentalists, supply side experts, and, you know, I see us, all of us here today on the demand side. So really, for me, it doesn't matter how we generate that electricity, as long as it's clean, but we still have a place in actually managing that energy and reducing that energy, which still comes down to the people not using it. It doesn't matter whether we've got clean energy coming in, you'll still be managing it. And, you know, and I had a conversation with someone the other day and he said, oh, it don't matter about leaving the lights on, their LEDs. Well, we're still using those kilowatt hours. It's still making a dent into what we're trying to achieve. So it's all great, all this stuff, but we still need to manage at the end of it. We still need to be providing that service and the people turning stuff off. That's my point on it. You know,
yeah,
there is no amen after that, Mike.
Get people in the mindset that just because it is lower usage or lower kilowatts, there is still money that could be saved by switching it off.
Exactly.
Simply.
In a way, so for me, energy management is a journey. I say this, I've said it many, many times on my videos. So energy management is a journey. I don't like to start off day one installing solar and CHP because it starts to mask everything. It starts to mask the, you know, the process of shutting things down. So you need to get things down to a level. And I've seen CHP's been going in first of all, and then they've started to manage the energy, and they've started to then put pressure on them, the CHPs, because they're over generating. The CHP becomes oversized, the solar becomes oversized. So there's a process to follow, I honestly believe.
Actually, that's a really good point, Paul, because in Germany, if you're applying for a renewable energy grant for new technology, you've got to have ISO 50001 in, which shows that you're actually managing your energy, because otherwise you're using renewable energy just to waste it. And I think that's the point you just made.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a point I always make on heating systems, you know, that is that thing, you know, you should be insulating everything first, getting your load down. There's not much kudos in having the most efficient boiler if the building you've got it in is about as energy efficient as a tent.
Yeah, exactly.
Mike and I was called into this organisation, and they're worried about their load. And when you look at their load, it's borderline sort of energy consumption. They really do need to make some big savings. But there we are in looking at this, and what they're trying to do is add more transformers, more load coming in. Well, instead of looking at the property, you know, there was no LEDs installed. Everywhere you walked was lights on. There was no best practice. Instead of spending hundreds of £1,000s and putting new transformers in and supplies in, let's just go around and turn the lights off. Let's work with the organisation and shut it all down. The amount of savings that they can make doing it that way is significant.
We'll go back to
many of them stories.
We'll go back to the old Save It campaigns of was it the 80s?
Do you
when
know,
everybody had stickers everywhere to save
it's
it.
funny.
Yeah.
I've been online trying to find a picture of that sticker. You know, the Save It sticker.
Yeah.
I remember that campaign. If anyone's still got one of those, John, you've probably got them.
Yeah, I've got a few somewhere. I'll dig them out of my archives. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Send me some. I'd really like to.
Yeah, I mean, just to say about switching stuff off. I did an energy audit of a factory in Cambridgeshire. I looked at the half-hourly data, and about half of a shift every night, they basically stopped production, but the baseline didn't go down very much. And I said, why don't you just switch off every bit of a kit that you don't need? And to cut a long story short, they did that, and they reduced their electricity consumption by 25.4%. And that was by simply getting each team to come up with a spreadsheet with a list of things, what they're going to switch off when, and when they were going to switch it back on again. And the cost of that capital cost was zero, and that's now saving them £54,000 a year. So, you know, even in the UK, where we've got a lot of sophisticated controls and everything else, there are still opportunities out there for people simply to switch off stuff they don't need.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure Stephen would agree that, you know, the starting point with so many things is, I agree with you, John, is to set it up and run it correctly.
Yeah.
It'd be nice to have an amnesty where everyone had to turn off everything they didn't need over this period of time to see what impact that would make. We have actually had this with COVID because the demand side has actually gone down significantly, specifically in the UK. That would make a massive difference. And there's been another question come in from Malaysia. Apologies if I pronounced the name wrong. So what do we mean by consistent universal energy storage? Who picked that point up? Was that you?
I'm not so sure that I didn't hear that particular term used, but I think it may have referred to what I was saying, where I think that energy storage will become almost universal, because it's, well, if you take an electric vehicle analogy, you know, the way you eke out the most from each kilowatt of energy is to use it carefully and recycle it wherever possible. And you need a buffer vessel to store that in, whether that's a big tank of water, a supercapacitor, or a battery of other sorts. You know, certainly that would be the explanation I'd put to that term there.
Just to add points to that, so that is a big requirement on our generation, because we've got wind generation and solar, which are making up a big part of our generation. If it stops being windy or we get more wind and the sun, if we start losing that balance, we need to fall back on somewhere to balance that. So what could happen is if we've got too much energy, well, let's just put it all into the batteries, charge people's batteries up and give them free energy. If it goes the other way, then we take it back. So we could use that as our buffer point. And, you know, there's going to be a significant amount of people on the road with cars that are battery operated. And that is a massive battery that can be utilized going forward. It's a no-brainer, isn't it?
Well, there's also restrictions on the capacities we've got in certain cities as well. So we're running at 98, 99% electrical capacity, and you know, with adding in more EV points, and you know, lots of companies moving maybe away from gas to electrical, we're putting a greater demand on the infrastructure. So by having local battery storage where we can smooth those out, when we do get a peak, we can keep it to the 99% capacity that we have, and take that peak with local storage, whether it be by batteries that are physically on site, or maybe use of EV cars that are actually parked on site.
Yeah. The infrastructure does have a big question mark over it, and there does need to be, you know, we're talking about, you know, the fairy tale stuff regarding, oh yeah, we get all these cars, but yes, you're right, Steve, there is an infrastructure issue that will have to be addressed, and how we address that, I'm not the expert on that side of it, but it'd be good to see how we need to engage that side. It's important that we do engage that side. So we're coming to the end of our 1 hour slot. Does anyone want to bring up another subject? We can overrun slightly if you're wanting to do that. Silence is the answer. Well, look, thank you. I really appreciate your time, everyone, for coming on this call. It's been amazing experience. I really enjoyed it. It's good to see you all. And Mike, I haven't seen you for weeks. John, I've never really shook your hands and met you in person. Martin, I see on a regular basis. Steve, we haven't seen each other. I think I see you the week before we went into lockdown, and
You're right.
Had a bit of a reunion meeting. So it's lovely to really see you all. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank today the Clean. Start again. I'd like to thank today the Clean Revolution, Clean Energy Revolution team for putting all this together. For everyone who's listening, there is a link that you can join the YouTubes and watch this all again. Watch us guys carry on talking about things again if you wanted to, because it was riveting conversation. So thank you very much for joining us all today. So thank you.
Thanks for the invitation.
Thanks.
Thanks very much. Yeah, thanks, Paul.